Okay, it is 9 o'clock in the Netherlands, and I think it's 4 p.m. in Manila, and somewhere in between for everyone else. So I would like to welcome you all to our part 2 of our webinar series that we've been hosting. My name is Lauren Zielinski. I work with the Water Accounting and Water Productivity Group at IHE Delft, and I'll be co-hosting today's webinar with Jelle Beekma from the Asian Development Bank, and we're very happy to have you all here. So today's webinar will be about water accounting and improved decision making and water security using water accounting. And we have some great speakers lined up for you. So I would like to quickly go over the rules for the webinar. First, I would like to ask that everybody turn off their video and audio. This helps us focus on the presenters and prevents any distractions in people watching or listening. During the presentations, we do encourage you to use the chat function. You can introduce yourself, maybe your name, where you work from, the country you live in. It's nice to see where you all come from for us, to see who's joining, and for you all to connect with each other. You can also use the chat to ask questions, and we really encourage you to do this. What will happen is during the presentations, I'll be collecting the questions, and then at the end, we have a Q&A session, and I will present them to the panel. And if you would like to ask somebody specific a question, just maybe indicate that using a small @ symbol or something else. Once we get to the Q&A session and you want to ask a question, you can continue to use the chat function, or you can use the raise hand function. So on the bar, you should see a small hand that says raise hand, and then we can call on you and you can turn on your microphone if you would like to ask a question directly. And after this webinar, the presentations and the recording will be made available on the ADB website, so be sure to check that out. The agenda for today will be about 1 hour. We'll start off with a quick introduction to the work that's been done on water accounting with Jelle Beekma. First presenter will be Dr. Elga Salvadore from IHE Delft Institute for Water Education, and she'll introduce us to water accounting and the principles of water accounting. Second will be Dr. Marloes Moel, also from IHE Delft, and she will talk about how we can use water accounting in decision making. And then our third presenter is Dr. P.S. Rao from the Advanced Center for Integrated Water Resources Management in Karnataka, India, and he'll talk about the vision that we have for water accounting and remote sensing for water security going into the future. And after that, we'll have our Q&A session. So again, we encourage you all to be very active in the chat and engage with the panel as much as possible. As you'll see in the rest of the webinar, there's been a lot of work done. There's been many case studies and many different trainings that's happened over the past couple of years, and it would be really difficult to showcase all of that in 1 or 2 webinars. So we're doing a blended approach. So in addition to what we'll be presenting today, we also have many reports and short summary videos that we'll put online, and then other reference materials. If you're interested in an online course, IHE Delft offers a free online course on water productivity and water accounting using WAPOR. So you can go to our OpenCourseware site and check that out. There'll also be interactive data in the future. There's been a lot of spatial data that's been generated as part of this project, and we think it's great that everyone can interact with it. So in the future, FAO will be hosting this on their Aqua Maps platform. But if you would like to get a sneak peek and see what it looks like, you can also go to this waterinag.org/application/ADB-WP, and you can see a case study for Karnataka and Mongolia. So in the corner, you'll see a quick preview, but I'll put these links in the chat as well if you would like to take a look. And you can find all of these things in the upcoming weeks on the ADB Development Asia website, as well as wateraccounting.org. And when they're ready, we will send everyone in this webinar an email so you know where to find them. And with that, I would like to introduce my co-host, Jelle Beekma, to describe a bit more about the project and the activities that's happened, as well as why water accounting is so important.
Thank you very much, Lauren, and welcome to everybody. Good morning, afternoon, even good evening for some. One of the very important things, or added advantages, you could say, I think, of water accounting is that it is an objective system, and that everybody who would use the same type of software would come up with the same sort of answers. And that is, in water, of course, quite important, because there are often all kind of conflicts between people on water distribution. And this caricature that you see here on the screen with 2 people looking at the same thing but from a different side, 3 sees the one on the right, 4 sees the one on the left. is sort of typical of these type of discussions. If you have one objective way of looking at it, you can easier come to a dialogue, which is important not only in country level, but even in transboundary water management, which quite, of course quite often happens because basins don't stop at the administrative boundaries. Next slide. Another thing that I just want to put your attention to is the difficulty that we sometimes have in indicating what is actually the precipitation that we have. Yeah, water accounting, of course, is about how much water do we have and how much water do we use, and the input is the precipitation. And here you see a photograph where you see with the dark lines that reach till the soil surface, that is a rain shower, and on the left and the right you see nothing. And it just depends quite often where our rain gauge is, if we catch this or not. The beauty of remote sensing is that we look at the entire surface and we find where it is. So sometimes we can also wonder, can a rain gauge of 11 centimeter in diameter actually capture how much falling? Maybe once we have a very good way of calibrating it, do this much better with remote sensing. Next one, please. What we have been doing this as ADB already for quite a while, and I think what's unique of the way that we're dealing with it at the moment is that we have tried to make things a bit more practical, looking at how we can guide investments, because that's of course what Asian Development Bank is very much about. What can we do to have loans with our countries to improve the water management significantly? And the importance, of course, of water accounting that we're looking at today is does a basin have enough water resources for everything that we want to do at the moment? And if we plan in new sort of developments, is there enough water at different places available? So we can see the spatial and the temporal variability of water, because we have series over time. And we, of course, if we look at satellite imagery and we combine it with maps, we have a complete spatial coverage. And then do we find some consistent differences in water consumption, differences between different locations, but also differences between allocation and consumption? And can we do something about that? Then yesterday we talked more about water productivity that goes on a more detailed scale. Today we look much more on the assessment of the basin, and we give to give a very nice example, we do this also in the Philippines, in Mindanao. There are hardly any measurements there. But now that we've done this water accounting, we know so much more about spatial distribution, about temporal distribution, and about the differences between locations that are consistent or maybe just only random. And that, of course, can very well guide what we can do in our projects. So our first project we did in Cambodia, in Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Indonesia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Vietnam. And the expansion that we're doing, that we're discussing about now, is a different approach, like I talked about already, more practical, and also new areas, particularly also some areas with limited data availability. This slide here shows the different projects that we have been looking at for the water accounting. First of all, the Karnataka, and we hear a bit more about that from Dr. Rao in the end of the presentations today. There we look at the Krishna basins, 2, 3 and 4. In Kazakhstan, we're looking at the Nura Sarisu river basin. Unfortunately, that project is postponed, but at least we will give more information to the government for later projects. Cambodia, we look in more detail than we did already in the Tonle Sap river basin. In Mongolia, we have done it on the Selenge river basin. And in the Philippines, like I talked about already, in Mindanao, the river basins, we know so much more about water distribution in temporal and in spatial dimensions. So without much further ado, I would like to give the floor now to Elga, who will tell more about the principles. And I would like to once more also ask our presenters to be as short as possible, so we have some time for the question and answers. Thank you very much.
I can give a short introduction to who Elga is. So Dr. Elga Salvadore is a lecturer in water accounting at IHE Delft in the Netherlands. and she teaches water accounting and remote sensing related subjects and is involved in various capacity developments and research projects in Cambodia, Egypt, India, Jordan, and Palestine. In 2017, she was appointed a guest professor at the Vrije Universiteit Brussels and KU Leuven in Belgium, where she teaches environmental programming in Python for students of the Inter-University Master in Environmental Engineering. So thank you, Elga, for being here.
Thank you, Lauren, for the nice introduction, and thank you, Jelle, for the first presentation. And thank you and welcome you all to this webinar. So as mentioned, I will try to be brief and give you an overview of the basic principles of water accounting. And I've been involved in the first phase of water accounting with ADP. I worked in India, Madhya Pradesh, and Karnataka. And for this second part, I did the accounts for the K2, K3, and K4 sub-basins of Krishna. And also I worked in Cambodia and the Tonle Sap. So I will try to be brief. So in 10 minutes, I will try to answer 3 questions, looking at what is water accounting in general, as a general concept. Also, what can water accounting do for us? How we can use it, again, in a very general terms. And then I would like you to just to give you an idea of the fact that there are multiple water accounting systems available. And then I will specifically talk about Water Accounting Plus, which is the approach we have used for these different studies in Asia, and which is strongly based on remote sensing. So water accounting in general is a tool that is designed to support us and support decision making. And this is a way for us to make sense of how much water is available and how to use it. And this is the definition from a recent document from the Food and Agriculture Organization that has defined water accounting as a systematic quantitative assessment of status and trends in water supply, demand, distribution, and accessibility and use of water. Now, as you can imagine from this definition, it's a pretty comprehensive type of tool that help us in making sense and understanding where is the water, how much do we have, how much we can still use. Now, generally, the water accounting framework is divided in 3 main components. So first we do data collection, and we try to identify what is actually available, which data we have, which data we actually still need. And then data alone is not enough. Therefore, we have analysis tools to move from data to information. And then water accounting also includes a component of communication. So we want to make this information available for decision makers, for stakeholders, different stakeholders. Can also be practitioners, academics, and researchers. Water accounting is being applied at different geographical domains. So in one way, we can look at irrigation scheme level. So we can zoom in a particular area and look at how much is the water there, how much is used and consumed. Next, please. Or we can look at the basin scale. And then, of course, there the use and the different sectors will be different. It's not just agriculture. We also look at natural land cover types. Next, please. And what is often done is also look at the accounts and these fluxes of water. How much is the dependency of water of a country from upstream, from upstream flows? Next, please. But what specifically can we do with water accounting? Next. So generally, we use this approach to answer, like Jelle mentioned before, some specific questions. For example, how much is the water use and which sector is using how much? Next, please. Particularly, we look at, for these studies and water accounting at a river basin scale, and there you have different sectors. So normally we use a land use map to identify the different sectors. So we don't just look at agriculture, rain-fed and irrigated, but we realize that other sectors are also demanding water, like hydropower, fishery, but natural systems as well, like ecosystems. And it's often quite challenging to balance the demand and the supply. So we have maybe growing demands and supply changing due to climate change. So we want to find a way. So this tool is supposed to help us in this way. And next, please. And also to look at what is very important to make a distinction of is consumptive and non-consumptive use. So if a certain the water is utilized by a sector, but in non-consumptive use, meaning that this water can be then utilized again and recycled afterwards for a different purpose. Next, please. Generally speaking, water accounting is not used for day-to-day operations. So the purpose of this is more the long-term planning. And if you look at the cycle of the integrated water resources management, you can see that water accounting can support in the water resources assessment. And so to give an information of what is the current status and also some trends, so looking at the past. You can use the tool also to look at possible future scenarios and then help in water resources policies and maybe making strategies. And at the end of the cycle, we look at the monitoring and finding a way to evaluate progress. A few next, please, Lauren. Next, and next. Yeah. And then finally, I want to conclude by giving you an overview of different water accounting system briefly and then specifically on WA+. Next. I think one of the first and most widely used is the water accounting system developed by the International Water Management Institute with the work of David Molden. At the end of my presentation, I have a number of references, so if you want to look up this document. And this is often also called the finger diagram and is been initially designed to work at the irrigation scheme level, but it's been applied also for water basins. Next, please. And is based on a water balance approach and is trying to track water depletion rather than water withdrawals. And it's, as you can see, this is already kind of a way for communicating information, this type of graphical display. Next, please. Another very commonly or very well-known system for water accounting is the SEEA Water, which stands for the System of Environmental Economics, Environmental Economic Accounting for Water, which is the UN standard for water accounts. Next, please. Here I mentioned three main characteristics of this framework, and it's an integrated approach. Is based on water statistics and related data, so statistical data on water account, on water and water uses, and is trying to establish a link between water and economic principles. Next, please. Then finally, the Water Accounting Plus, and I'll spend a little bit more time discussing this, and which is the one we have worked on. So IHE Delft together with IWMI and FAO. Moving from this water accounts from David Molden, we have developed it further. Next, please. One first important point is that it's designed to work on river basin scale. Next. It's a combination of flow and depletion. Next, please. And the data acquisition is very particular. So compared to other water accounting systems. So what we use is spatial data and remote sensing data, as much as possible, open access, also other type of information. And the philosophy behind is the fact that we want to be able to tell something about water resources conditions also in regions, data scarce regions. And whenever data is available also on the ground as a ground observation, we try to use it for validation. Next, please. We have developed a standardized flow of computation using open access and open source software. Next, please. And we have added a reporting system, and we report in terms of sheets, maps, and table. Next, please. And the idea is we take these water accounting principles and we try to make it scalable so we can repeat this work on a regular basis, become spatially explicit, is not one value per country, for example, and more temporally detailed. We move from a yearly timescale to a monthly. Next, please. Maybe a few next and we see the overall picture here. So the basically, we start with a water balance, simple water balance model, which we feed with remote sensing data and other data sets. And then we create a set of accounting sheets, informative type of some infographics on like different components and indicators of the water balance. And we also present spatial distribution, which is often very important because conditions can really change from one area to another in a river basin. Next, please. And we do this in yeah, softer. Okay. And we also try to give a little bit more detail. So we move from this finger diagram to a more thematic set of accounting sheets covering different parts of the water cycle. And we are now moving to a part where we tailor-made this kind of presentations, because one river basin might be different and conditions might be different from one case to a next. Please. And then finally, the type of outputs that we present with the water accounting study. So we look at different type of indicators. For instance, we want to monitor over exploitation. In some cases is really important. We look at what is manageable and what is unmanageable to give the stakeholders information on what they can actually work on and how much can they improve and become more efficient with. How much is the exploitable, so how much water is still available for us to further develop, how much we should reserve for environmental needs, and how much is utilized already or how much is still utilizable. One other thing we try to quantify is what we call the difference between green and blue water. And then we link all this consumption, the evapotranspiration, to land use classes and different management type of strategies. And we have some modelings to track surface and groundwater and make estimation of supplies and return flows. Thank you very much. In the last slide that you will also receive, you have a list of some of publications, but on our website, we will also post some additional reports and information.
Thank you, Elga. That was a great presentation, a nice introduction on water accounting and the different water accounting methodologies for those of us who are new to the topic. So our next speaker I would like to introduce is Dr. Marloes Mol. She is an associate professor in water resources management at IHE Delft, where she currently manages the water accounting and water productivity team. Before joining IHE Delft, Marloes was based in the West Africa office of IWMI in Accra, Ghana, where she works on research projects dealing with dam operation and natural and built infrastructure in the West Africa region, particularly in the Volta Basin. And she was a visiting lecturer at the University of Zimbabwe between 2004 and 2007. So Marloes, we're happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And yeah, thanks, Elga, for this very nice presentation. So I think I can follow Jelle's recommendation to speed up the presentation a bit. So next slide, please. So this is the same IWRM planning cycle that Elga already explained. So I think I'll go to the next slide. I think the one is the most important point is that a part of that IWRM cycle is the water resources management plans that have been developed in in many years. People have been developed plans, but they're always based on observed data and observed information. So that's, for instance, rainfall and stream flow gauges. Jelle already highlighted the issue with a small rain gauge that's missing a lot of the observed rainfall. My professor always says, most of the rainfall falls next to the rain gauge and not in the rain gauge. And another main source of information is hydrological rainfall runoff modeling and looking at water allocation practices. A lot of the information is coming from water demand estimations based on empirical estimations or empirical relationships or availability of data. So what is, and this has worked very well. The only challenge is that, in the years, the increasing population, etc., there have been more challenges in terms of more basins are becoming water scarce, so there's more conflict and there's more need for information. In addition, the observation network is also declining. You see here a graph that I got from, you see the reference, where actually you would think, that there's more resources available, more data is being collected, but actually that's incorrect. And also the amount of data that's available with long time series of data to do the long-term estimations is also, often not available. It also has a lot of data gaps, issues with issues with the quality of data. The other issue is that it's point-based data, and it also does not include data on actual consumption. So it's all estimation of what people might need. Next slide, please. So Water Accounting Plus uses now this remote sensing data to provide this slide. So this is also a bit of an expansion to what Elga already explained. So what is mainly coming out of the Water Accounting Plus is basin level indicators in terms of the total water balance in a river basin, in and out, and the change in storage. But it also provides information about, how much is being utilized, how much is still available, and it separates this green and blue water. So this is one of the key outputs of Water Accounting Plus. Next slide, please. But because the underlying information that populates those sheets, there's a lot of additional information. So it provides different fact sheets, but also indicators and graphics as presented here. Next slide. So in addition, you have these kind of maps that are underlying the database, and a lot of spatial analysis can be done on these estimations. So what you see here is some work that Elga actually did in Karnataka, where, for instance, in the second graph, you see the ET blue. So that's the evaporation that comes from additional water, so not from rainfall. And if you then overlay that on the land use map, you can identify which land use classes, which areas consume the most water. And that you can then provide in, for instance, this kind of a pie chart that you see on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of opportunities for remote sensing to complement and add to the available information that is currently being used for water resources planning and management. So the reliability of remote sensing data for this purpose has improved significantly. More and more data sets have become available. And we now also have a more or less continuous data set for about 10 years where we can actually do trend analysis, and we can provide not just one snapshot, but we can provide a longer term picture of what is happening. One of the key elements that remote sensing can also provide is the actual consumption in the largest water consumer of water. So that's agriculture. So it can provide actual estimation of how much water is being used, and it provides spatial information. But we also realize that there's a lot of work needed to use that information to convert that into into information that is then useful and applicable by the end users. For instance, there's a need to adjust the hydrological models, which are normally rainfall runoff model, to incorporate water consumption data instead of demand estimations. We still do need validation with ground data to really see, if there are certain biases in the area of estimation. So we cannot use the remote sensing blankly as such. So there's always validation needed. And if you want to look at really long-term trend analysis and planning analysis, you often need more than 30 years of data to really look at statistical properties, and that is not available yet. And there has to be a development in scenario assessment. For instance, what happens if the climate changes? What does it mean for not only rainfall but also ET estimations? And another issue that we also see is that the water quality is not well represented. So that's something that also needs to be added, because it also affects the water availability. Next slide, please. So this Water Accounting Plus, this is just the same slide that Jelle showed. So these are the case studies that we've implemented in the two phases, spatially. So you see in the red or the pink ones are the phase 1 case studies, and the blue ones are the ones that we are currently finalizing. So we're now currently working on the Karnataka 3 sub-basin, Selenge in Mongolia, Tonle Sap in Cambodia, the island of Mindanao, or at least a number of river basins on the island, and Nueva Suija in Kazakhstan. Next slide, please. So just a few indicators of what kind of questions and what kind of information can inform this IWRM cycle. Next slide. So on the water resources issue assessment, we can look at different questions, such as what is the type of information that can be produced with Water Accounting Plus, what is the available water resource, but it can also provide the spatial and temporal variability. It provides information on water consumption patterns, and it can provide key indicators. Next one. On the policies and strategies, we can actually look at how will plant developments affect resources. Is there sufficient water available for the plant resources? So it can influence or can inform, what kind of policy and strategies to take in the particular basin. Next slide. And finally, the monitoring and evaluation of progress. Do improved agricultural water management practices implemented in the basin have the required results? For instance, do they improve water productivity? Do they increase water availability? So these kind of questions can all be answered with Water Accounting Plus. Next slide. And then finally, I got a draft on the Asian Water Development Outlook, and I see that there's also a lot of opportunity for Water Accounting Plus to contribute to the key dimension 2 on economic water security. And that actually states or recommends enhanced water resources monitoring and measurement and data availability, which Water Accounting Plus or remote sensing can provide. Improve water productivity, so we can also look at where water productivity is low, how can we improve it, and in the end monitor if the improvement has actually taken place. Next slide. So this is just a reference on the project that we've implemented the activities under. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marloes. That was a really nice presentation and an overview of how water accounting can inform different parts of the integrated water management cycle. So thank you again for your presentation. So our third and final presenter is Dr. P.S. Rao. He is the director of the Advanced Center for Integrated Water Resources Management and currently works for the government of Karnataka in India. He has 28 years of working experience in the water sector, having worked with ADB, the government of India and the Netherlands, the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, or FAO, universities, and other NGOs and donor agencies focused on water and agriculture. And he holds a PhD from Osmania University in India. So Dr. P.S. Rao, we're very happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren, for the introduction. Next slide, please. So in Karnataka, we had the opportunity to work with IHE UNESCO under the ADB supported program. So we have 7 basins in Karnataka, and larger ones are the Cauvery and Krishna 2 basins. And as you see on the left hand of the slide, several sectors are now competing for water. So it has become very important to really know much more than beyond agriculture. And on the right side, there is the rainfall trend for the last 30 years. So if you can observe that large area is falling less than 700 millimeter, which is very important in terms of drought management and kind of things. And on the left hand side, we have large rainfall, huge amount of rainfalls, but it flows very quickly into the sea. Next slide, Lauren. So we have a new state water policy drafted here in Karnataka, incorporating all the latest tools to be used and putting up the water security as the focus. It is to be approved very soon. And the scenario in Karnataka is that most of the basins have stressed water resources, and there is increasing demand from various other sectors other than agriculture because of the economic growth that state is aspiring to. And water security is the key. That is what we realize now for both food security as well as economic security. Next. So using this tool of water accounting, which has really supported us in a number of programs, usually this is the first time that in Karnataka we have been using the satellite imageries and the remote sensing technology. So we have this program of ADB supported since 2014, and we had the partnership developed with IHE in 2016. So we had an introduction workshop to introduce these tools for the higher level decision makers as well as all the managers in water managers. Then we also had consciously capacity building workshops for several engineers in water resource department in almost every year. And we have completed the assessment of water accounts for Tungabhadra sub-basin in the year 2018. And in the course of this work, ET maps have been created for Karnataka state for 15 years from period 2000 to 2014. That is the first time ever. And we are updating those to reflect until 2019. And as other speakers mentioned, we are also doing for other Krishna sub-basins the water accounts in the current year and the last year. Next, please. So this is the Krishna basin, and if you see the large area comes under Krishna basin. So we have almost like completed for the entire Krishna basin creating the water accounts. And on the right side is the land use land cover, which we used from the NRSC of the India. Next, please. So these are the basins for which water accounts are created using the satellite imagery and the technology. And on the left side is the Tungabhadra basin, which is the larger basin in Krishna within Karnataka. And the right side are the three sub-basins, Ghataprabha, Malaprabha, and Middle Krishna, what we famously call it as the Almaty thing. These are the basins for which the water accounts have been created with the support of IHE. Next, please. So what does these have produced the results, and how does it help the water resource management? ET is the most important component in the whole water cycle. So apart from the rainfall, and to understand ET, I think it is the most advantageous way of looking at getting insights into the water management in a basin. And also this tool has provided overview at a basin level, which is the right way of looking at instead of at the project level. And of course, the availability of water in spatial domain across the basin is also very much possible using this tool. The intersectoral competition of the water resources can be really planned to be addressed using the results of the water accounting. Plus, on-farm water management also is something which we can really facilitate with the water user cooperative societies using the results of the water accounting, especially the green water and the blue water components of the water accounts. And of course, outflows of the basin are known, including the groundwater, which can be also be accounted for over a period of time, and also look at whether they will be feasible to be used or kind of thing. Next, please. Water yield computation is one thing which is very much debatable with several land use changes that's happening in the basin. So using this water accounting tool, water computation of the water yield generated from within the state is what is really possible at an accurate place, which can also be used for expanding irrigation systems or addressing the water distribution problems at the tail ends of the large irrigation systems. Because in India, in Karnataka, we have irrigation systems running up to 200 kilometers. The command area, the canals run up to 200 kilometers plus. So this is a sizable area with using the remote sensing analysis. It's much useful to get better overview. Of course, the storages, the small storages, because now tank filling is becoming a big trend now, because the the minor irrigation tanks flows are now not that much during the dry years, and also because change in the land use and increase in the urbanization. Of course, climate change impacts is one thing which we can better understand using the blue water component in the water accounts, which is useful in improving the water governance, of course, the drought for the agricultural production and environmental flows. Next, please. So these are all the several insights which we thought are useful for looking into using the results of the water accounting. So how do we go in the future here? One thing is for sure, the capacity is much less, both within the department, in the government, as well as in the market, in the private sector too. So capacity increasing the capacity is one major thing which needs to be focused on, and we are trying to set up a dedicated team within the water resources department so that people can be working on water accounts every year for every sub-basin. And we will be moving a proposal to the government soon with to have the mandate given for certain section of the department or for SEEA WRM, our office itself, wherein dedicated engineers will be working along with the other remote sensing and GIS staff to be preparing the water accounts. Communicating this to the end users, largely the farming community, that is the water user cooperative societies, the institutional aspect of the irrigation management. We need much better communication, simple communication products. So we will be looking at it, how to do it. And of course, at the policy level, it is something else which the policy manager, policy level decision makers will be requiring. And we also see that at every large project office, the chief engineer's office, there should be some capacity who will be looking at using these water accounts and also preparing the water accounts. So we hope to get it at each sub-basin level, at least regularly on an every year basis. So this is the future what we are looking for. Next, please. Thank you very much, and we thank ADB for really providing us the opportunity to partnership with IHE. Thank you.
Dr. Rao, that was I really enjoyed how you talked about how it's really helping you and the work that you're doing, but also the challenges that are faced when implementing water accounting at the government scale and making sure that the capacity and the resources are there that are needed. So thank you for that insight. So now we are at the Q&A session, the question and answer session. So I will invite all the speakers to turn their cameras on again. And then we can start answering some questions. I've been collecting them from the chat, but if you have more questions, please continue to use the chat, or you can use the raise hand function. So maybe I'll start with a question on Water Accounting Plus in general. So is this, for Elga, is this an open source software, and how can one use Water Accounting Plus?
So the good news, yes, is an open source software, and we have. I think we can share the link on our platform where you can find the code. So most of it is programmed in Python, which is also a free open source computer language. And we have a number of trainings and open source, open courseware on how to use the software and how to do the calculations.
Nice, and I think you can also check out our website, wateraccounting.org, and we have a GitHub page that's very active, so we can share those as well. Sticking with Water Accounting Plus, we had some questions on the sheets, the indicator sheets. Like, are the ones that are there the only ones that exist, or can we add different sheets depending on our needs? How flexible is that?
Should I go again?
Yeah.
Okay, so it depends on your skills. Everything is there, and we are also ourselves working on doing some tailor-made accounting sheets for certain cases. Since the code and all the software is open source, you can of course adjust and adapt the code to your need, and perhaps if you have additional data or different questions, you can also code and your own indicators and then calculate that and present it.
Very nice.
I would be very much interested in seeing the new developments and what people actually are. We are also planning to have with different activities we do at IHE, have maybe kind of questions to see what the user actually are doing with the framework, what they're interested in, because we are also, it's a tool which is under development, a constant development. It's not a very, we want it to grow and continue and adjust to the need of actually people, practitioners and people using the software and the tools.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have a project where we're trying to engage a large user groups for Water Accounting Plus and seeing how we can adjust Water Accounting Plus to the needs of the users in different situations. So again, I think staying in touch on wateraccounting.org would be a great place to start to be involved with that. And I think one last question for Elga, again, kind of on these case studies and how you complete them. So how can a basin be split into subbasins, and what are the key boundary constraints for integrating different subbasins?
Okay, so the practical way I use to define subbasins, so there are a couple of ways. Either it's kind of a well-known boundaries because this is the way, for example, the government divides the basin into different subbasins, or a practical way is to look at if you have in situ or observation of flow, those locations are really good location as outlets then to delineate your subbasin and then join them and combine them into your big basin. We do that. I did that with some open source software. Like I mostly delineate subcatchments using QGIS. So that's the practical way.
Great, thank you. So I think now I have a few questions for Marloes. First is, without databases, can we rely on empirical estimations for irrigation and water supply demands when sizing water storage dams?
Well, I think this is actually the beautiful thing about the remote sensing, that you can actually see what the actual consumption in irrigation systems. So you actually don't need these empirical estimations. What is really challenging is that for agriculture, we can actually observe it from remote sensing, but for other sectors, there's no remote sensing information to estimate the demand or the amount of water that's being consumed, for instance, in the domestic sector or for industries. So I think that there's a lot of challenges in that regard in terms of how do you incorporate those in the sheets, because currently the Water Accounting Plus is really land-based analysis.
Right, and I think slightly building on this topic of validation, someone asked, ground validation is very important, but what should we do in ungauged basins?
So we actually have a very nice case study where we're trying to do it without ground validation. So not for all of them we get like time series where we compare it to, but there's always like some reports that provide some kind of estimation how much water is available, what is the to compare it with. So there are different things to compare it to instead of having like actual data. But what I would still recommend is that you look for neighboring catchments, neighboring rainfall stations that are not necessarily in the area, and still do a comparison for those areas to make sure that in that particular area that you're looking at, the remote sensing data is accurate. And then use it later on to do the water accounts in your study area.
Very nice. And one more question for Marloes. Is there any study on the quantification of environmental uses? Because in some conditions, the actual environmental uses can be substantial but not measured.
I think this is also a question that you are interested in, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, so we don't have, a remote sensing based estimation for environmental flows. What we're currently using is a database from IWMI on environmental flow requirements and use that as the reserved flow. But we do realize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to fully incorporate environmental flow requirements into the water accounting sheets. So I think somebody was looking for additional gaps in what to do with Water Accounting Plus. I think to be able to incorporate environmental flows would be something to improve.
Nice work for the future. And now I have a few questions for Dr. Rao. Does Water Accounting Plus address the conjunctive use of surface water and groundwater in the agricultural sector, especially in semi-arid regions of India?
Well, it is both yes and no. The groundwater part is still yet to be largely clarified, but like if you have some areas where there is less of surface water and definitely canal supplies and a lot of groundwater use, and definitely yes, it can be. So there are several options and several results that will come out of this exercise which can be corroborated along with the ground data which you have, and then arrive at some of these things. So that way, yes, conjunctive use can also be quantified and planned for using the results of water accounting, but as such, you will not have a straightforward result in that.
Everything is complicated. What is this? One more question for you. What is the scope of the Water Accounting Plus tool in the resolution of the dispute, such as the Krishna water dispute?
Disputes. Well, Krishna water now we don't have yet any dispute because it has been long settled. Cauvery also latest settled. But yes, definitely for the management authority of the basin, I think this water accounting really provides good tool to get an overview of the entire basin at a very less time and with less effort on data and also more accurate results. So I'm sure management authorities will be able to use it much better, but yes, it should happen soon.
Great. And then also for you, can the data generated from Water Accounting Plus for Karnataka river basins be hosted on the AccuWarm website so it can be accessed by other stakeholders?
It's for me?
I think, yeah. Well, I know I had mentioned a lot of the spatial data will be hosted on the AquaMaps platform from FAO, but will it also be hosted on the website of your?
Oh yeah, definitely. We are setting up something called water resource information for the state, what we call it as Karnataka Water Resource Information System, which is a comprehensive database of water use as well as the water resources available of all the sectors. And we are already uploading all the ET maps and the reports and the results of these water accounting studies in it. Initially, it will be accessible to all the agencies and government departments, and hopefully we are working towards a public policy to make it more public, into public domain.
Great. Yeah, I think it's important to share all the work that we can through different avenues. So again, through your agency's website, but also through the wateraccounting.org website and the Development Asia website from ADB. I think we'll be able to share all this, as much data as possible, including the case studies. I read that someone would like to be able to read the case study from Mongolia. So we're currently finalizing many of our case studies, and they'll be available in the upcoming weeks. So again, we can send an email to all the registered participants in this webinar to let you know when those are available. There is one question on, are there standard guidelines for estimating environmental flows? And I see Marloes had a nice response to that in the chat, but I would also like to advertise IHE is working on another open courseware course on the fundamentals of environmental flows. So if you check back with us in a few months, and something that environmental flows is something you're really interested in, then I think that would be a nice course for you. And I think I have, let's say, a question for Elga. People are interested about where do you find the remote sensing data that you use in Water Accounting Plus? And I think also, can it be used for groundwater as well? So how does the data work, and can you use it for groundwater situations?
Okay, so we use multiple remote sensing data sources for water accounts. So there are a number of agencies that provide, as you know, there are many satellites available, and there are dedicated missions, for example, for estimating rainfall or providing global database on evapotranspiration. And then all this data is available for free. So there are a number of sources and platforms where this data can be downloaded. We have developed software in Python to automatically download this data from the different platforms. So what the user need to do is to create their accounts and then use these accounts in their scripts, in their software. The first step we do generally in a water accounting study is to compare the different, for example, rainfall products from remote sensing with in situ data. Similarly, we compare different ET products, and then we select the best combination for that particular case study. So that's the way we usually do. I think more information we can it's provided on our website. Again, the same reference Lauren mentioned before, the wateraccounting.org. You have a nice list of sources of data. And of course, this gets updated every now and then because there are new data sets being released. So we try to keep up to date on the new development. Now, groundwater is a big challenge. I think that was the second part of the question. It's we have some. There is one mission is called GRACE, is trying to estimate the total storage change. So where this includes groundwater, soil moisture, but also surface water storage change. But it's in general quite challenging to look from satellite under the ground. Therefore, I think most of the studies and works are done also. You need some additional modeling to be able to actually give a proper estimation of groundwater flows, for example. And we give, so we have an accounting sheet dedicated to groundwater, and that's based on simple water balance approach. So it's not a full groundwater model, for example. But I think what I'm also interested in terms of research is to look at the how the framework can be linked with full hydrological models, like spatially distributed hydrological models, and as well as groundwater models, for example.
Nice, thank you. It's I think a lot of work has been done on water accounting, and of course there's always more, and hydrology is a very complicated science, but it's great to hear that we have a vision moving forward. I think a few more questions, one for Marloes. Is it possible to look at temporal trends even without significant calibration?
Well, I think this is actually one of the really strong points of remote sensing, is that we get like the absolute value is not always accurate, but to show the trend terms of that, whether it goes up or goes down, or there's a significant changes or variation between the years. I think that's actually the strength of the remote sensing, to look at those trends. I think that the main challenge now is that is 10 years sufficiently long to have a sufficient long time span to look at long-term trends.
Great, thank you. And I see in the chat we have some back and forth with Dr. Rao and Yella, but I think it brings up a nice point. We were asking about, are there any examples how water accounting data is used to adapt allocations? And Dr. Rao, you talked about the importance of preparing good communication for decision makers. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, as you now see the results, the sheets, the different sheets, although it is little simpler than what the finger diagram of IMI is, still it is not that easy to understand for the non-water resource specialists. There are so many components in it, and the interlink of these each components, even the concept of evapotranspiration itself is something new for non-water resource people. So we need to really translate these results into the local management language, the water management language. And I think that's what we will be attempting it, and we hope to do it soon. We are always challenging Elga and the team also with lots of these questions to make it more simple, and Elga is supporting. So we should be able to do it. At the project level, at the chief engineer's level, people are able to understand this better. But for it to really become the part of the management and the governance thing, I think it still needs a lot of dissemination work.
Yeah, I agree. I think as scientists, we do a great job of communicating with each other. But sometimes we need to remember not everyone has a hydrology background, or some people don't even like numbers. So we have to make sure that we're able to communicate effectively with different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And I think we're kind of coming to the end of the webinar, but I would like to actually ask Yella a question about how do you see the future of water accounting within the ADB? I see somebody had made a nice request to have their basin included in the next round of funding, but how do you see that these results are integrated into the actions or decisions of the ADB?
Well, we thank you very much, Lauren. That's a good question. Of course, it's always difficult to say things about the future. It's nice to look back and then say, this is how it should have been done and how we can do it better. But what you see is there's been a trend to do it more and more. We are presenting here the work that we've done under this specific contract, but we do it in different ways and with different organizations as well. So we have done other projects in Tajikistan. We're doing something in the Amu Basin at the moment, and there are a number of other projects that are using water accounting. So it's an approach that is getting bigger and bigger, and there are ideas to have a platform on water accounting and water productivity, much like the WAPR that FAO is having, and extend it worldwide. And at this moment, we're actually discussing if there are possibilities to participate in that. So that would probably be a very interesting way of trying to cover the entire part of Asia in this case, and being able to zoom into different areas of interest, which I think has a lot of value. And what Marloes just told, seeing temporal trends as well, is a very powerful tool to see what is going on with production of different agricultural crops. And focusing on agriculture, I think, is logic, because that's the main consumer of water. If you look at consumption per se of what people do, it's actually almost 92%. That includes green water as well, of course. So I think it's important to try to see if we can participate and continue and expand on it. The exact plans I can unfortunately not tell at this moment, but we're discussing how we can do that. And I think there's a big future for it. I mean, we get so many data free from the space, and we need to use that. You can never cover everything with these small rain gauges, like Marloes already said. Most falls actually not in the rain gauge, but next to it. It's a very good and powerful sort of metaphor for how difficult that is, and that's going to continue. We saw even less data. So Yeah, I think it's an important tool, and we're definitely going to continue working with that with more intensity and in larger scale.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of momentum behind water accounting at the moment. So I think an advice to decision makers, to scientists and basins around the world would be to look more into how you can apply water accounting in your own basins, using your own expertise or different trainings. It seems like a nice way to move forward. So I think actually we have one last question in the chat and then we'll wrap up. This is for Dr. Rao. And they were curious, is the water accounting information going to inform decisions on interlinking the rivers in India? Big question.
Well, interlinking rivers is still a very distant dream. There are several other aspects which possibly will not make it happen very soon. If you really have lots of satellite data at the national level, I'm sure, or for the region where the links have to be made, it will definitely help the take better decisions.
Great. Yeah, it's important for everyone at different levels to have it, like Marloes mentioned, for future planning. It's very important. So with that, I think we have reached the end of our webinar. I want to thank all of our presenters for their wonderful presentations and also for their nice answers from the questions from the participants. I would like to thank all of our participants for joining us today and being active. And I think it was a really nice session to hear about the work that has been done, about water accounting in general, and then the future of water accounting. So we hope you stay engaged. Like we said, there'll be more information becoming available in the upcoming weeks about the different case studies and some small training materials. So please keep in touch with the ADB Development Asia website, as well as the wateraccounting.org. And we will be sending you out more information about that in the future. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ella.
Bye.
Thank you,
bye.
Helga.